It's now 6. Oh, you got everything on, Tom?
Recording in progress.
All right. Now, welcome everyone. It's 6:30 p.m. I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Fenton Township Board on this 14th day of September 2023. I ask everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Clerk Krug, will you please call the roll?
Lorraine,
Present.
Reed is absent. Kotrek,
Here.
Kruger is present. Kessler is absent as of right now. Gopal. Here. Tucker.
Present.
You have 5 members present.
Thanks, Bob. All right, I'd also like to note for the, that our Township Attorney, Jack Belser, Operations Manager, Tom Broker, Zoning Administrator, Mike Dean, Fire Chief, Ryan Volz, and Township Assessor, Julia Wilson, are also present. Also present are the members of the Fenton Township Planning Commission. Their regular meeting was upstairs, began upstairs, and has been reconvened in this room. So just to clarify, the Township Board special meeting is joining the Planning Commission regular meeting.
So, Vince, I think it would be appropriate for us to, for the planning commission, to have a motion to reconvene the planning commission meeting.
Okay?
They recess to come down here.
That's right, you recessed to come down here. Go ahead, Jim.
Alrighty, is there a motion to that effect to come out of recess for this meeting? I heard a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Reconvene, thank you.
Thank you. All right, our township engineers were supposed to be joining us via Zoom. I don't see them. Tom?
I've texted to see if
Jackson,
they're
I'm just
able
gonna
to
move
make it.
forward.
Yep.
Okay, tonight's special meeting is on short-term rentals, or STRs. You're gonna start tonight's meeting with our zoning administrator, Mike Dean, reviewing the results of the STR survey conducted May 11th through June 8th by the township. Mike?
It'd be easier for you to come up to the
Yeah,
podium.
would you come up to the podium, please? Can everyone hear? All right.
All right, so this is a repeat of information for some people. It's new information for others, so we're going to start at the beginning and work our way up to today. So if we can go to the next slide. So the township, the Planning Commission has been reviewing short-term rental regulations since the beginning of the year. The reason why we started now and not before was that there was talks about the state taking away local control, where it would essentially be treated as a permitted use similar to a single-family residence. After the last change in leadership at the state level, we realized that that bill was not moving forward, so we decided now is the time for us to take action to do our own research and determine what is appropriate for short-term rentals in the township. Now, I think so the Planning Commission has been doing their due diligence, right? They have reviewed what other communities have done. They have reviewed literature from the American Planning Association and the Michigan Association of Planners and MML and MTA, looking to determine what the best practices are for short-term rental regulations. Doing their fact-finding, they found that it would be appropriate to do a survey of the residents to elicit additional information or additional input on short-term rentals. I think it's important to note that this survey is not the only tool that's being used as part of this review. Just like you wouldn't build a house using only a saw, you need to use all the tools in your toolbox to have an effective decision-making process. So a survey was determined that it would be appropriate. The survey was developed looking at what other communities across the country had done in similar circumstances, what questions they were asking to elicit public opinion. The Planning Commission determined that it would be appropriate to ask if people lived on the lake, what their general experiences with short-term rentals are, what their experience in their immediate neighborhood has been with short-term rentals, what their preference on how to handle short-term rentals, preferences for allowing rental of watercraft with short-term rentals, appropriate locations, and items regulations should address relating to short-term rentals. So on the next slide, Township mailed out 6,739 surveys on May 11th. There was a link on the website to an online version. An article was put in Tri-County Times on May 16th, informing the public that the township was seeking input on short-term rentals. And we also reached out on social media. So we figured that having a multi-layered approach would help us get the word out that we are seeking opinions. So out of those 6,739 surveys that were mailed out, we had 594 paper surveys were returned, 485 online surveys were filled out. We also had 110 surveys returned as undeliverable, which we're not quite sure why, because they were addressed to occupant at residence address, but they were. So total, we had 1,079 responses, or 16.28 return rate. So we look at that survey itself. The first question was, do you live on a lake? 56% of the respondents said that they do live on a lake. The next was, do you advertise your house for short-term rentals? And this was an important question to figure out what's going on out there and what are people considering. And for the township as a whole, 10 had responded that they currently rent out part of their house for short-term rentals or all of it. 66 said that they were considering advertising for short-term rentals in the future. And then 92% said no, they don't advertise and they don't plan to. We broke that down further into lake properties and non-lake properties, because when we consider the township, there's different aspects to different areas in the township, and it's important to understand the entire public's point of view on this type of use. For those that live on the lake, 92% again, right, said that they did not and they don't plan to. 7, for little over 1%, said that they currently advertise. And another 36, for about 6%, said that they don't right now, but they are considering it. When we look at the non-lake properties, we have similar numbers, right? 92% said no, they don't plan to. 30 for 6.5% said that they don't advertise yet, but they're considering it. 3 for just under 1% said that they currently advertise for short-term rentals. We asked a couple open-ended questions, right? One of them, based on your experience, what is your opinion of short-term rentals? So about half provided short-form responses. Those topics included their experiences using short-term rentals, their experiences living near short-term rentals, the nuisance experiences they have around the lake, concerns about overcrowding along lakes and water safety, concerns about property values, and questions of renters' respect for property and neighbors. Then we have provided a list of issues that are commonly associated with short-term rentals and asked, what type of experience have you had with these in your neighborhood? And the majority said, I have not experienced any of these issues. But those that did experience, right, excessive noise, trespassing, litter, parking, trash, were all part of the experiences that they were having. So we also provided an other category, right, to make sure we're covering all the bases there. Other responses that came up a couple times were water safety concerns, rules not being followed, concerns about barking and unleashed and unmonitored pets, excessive drinking and marijuana use, and lack of respect for the surrounding properties. Now, the next major question we asked was, how would you like to see the township handle short-term rentals? Now, on the charts on here, I did make one assumption, right, as opposed to the others where we just provided the straight data, and that I included In the percentages, allow short-term rentals with no regulation, with allow short-term rentals with regulations. We're making the assumption that if you're willing to allow them with no regulations, that you would be willing to allow them with regulations. And when you look at that, the numbers for the township as a whole, you had 45% who were in favor of allowing short-term rentals. You had 48.38% who were in favor of banning short-term rentals. Another 4.5% had no preference. And then just under 2% had no answer. Now, we broke that up between lake lots and non-lake lots. For the lake lots, right, about 40% were in favor of allowing them with or without regulations. 55% were in favor of banning them. You had another 3% with no preference and 1.5% with no answer. For the non-lake lots, kind of saw the reverse, right? You had 52% in favor of allowing them, just about 40% banning them in all circumstances. 6.64% with no preference, and then another 1.7% with no answer. The next questions we asked were related to watercraft and whether or not they should be allowed as part of a short-term rental. And we didn't break this one down because this was probably the clearest of all the questions that we asked. Should motorized watercraft such as pontoon boats, jet skis, etc. be allowed? And 75% no, right, to 25% yes. For non-motorized, such as kayaks, rowboats, and canoes, right, you're at 64% to 36%, right, in favor of allowing the non-motorized watercraft. The next we asked, if Benton Township were to create short-term rental regulations, how appropriate would it be in the following zoning districts? And I think the immediate takeaway is that half the population didn't think it would be appropriate in any zoning district, which is consistent with the original question, is should you allow them or not allow them? And then as you look through the chart, you can see the varying degrees of appropriateness based on the zoning district. And the zoning districts were broken up by low density, medium density, high density, residential, multifamily, residential, commercial, and industrial. And so we did that for the township, we did that for lake lots, and we did that for the non-lake lots. So we skip ahead to one more slide there. One more slide. There we go. So the next question, if the township were to create a short-term rental regulation, how important would it be to include the following requirements for rental hosts? So we asked, how important would it be for them to get a business license, right? Require a special use permit, require notification to neighbors, and require that the host be on site during the short-term rental. All right, so you can see which ones had the most importance to the residents versus those that weren't as important. I think we can follow up to how important would it be for short-term rental regulations to address the following concerns? All right, so again, we asked about common nuisance complaints that we'd heard, right? Regulate noise, limit trash or litter, limit parking impacts, limit traffic impacts, limit advertising signs, require fire and building safety inspections, regulate special events, and limit the number of consecutive days for rental. And so, again, right, you can review those graphs and make your interpretation on that, but I think it's very clear that all of these are very important to the residents. So that brings us to, where we are today, right? The questions and comments that you get during the public comments, right? If the township were to move forward and allow short-term rentals, well, how are you going to regulate them? Who's going to be taking the calls, right? Because we all know the residents don't want to call the police for every matter that they have. Who's going to call? Who's going to handle the after-hour complaints? How are you going to know if someone's running a short-term rental or not? So we've been continuing our research, right? We haven't just said, all right, we did the survey and that's it. We kept on looking for additional solutions. So there are management companies that provide services to communities to help identify those and address those issues. They can provide address identification, right, which they will scour 70 different websites to identify listings and identify who is actually renting in the township. They will provide compliance monitoring, so they will review those listings to make sure that they are consistent with the ordinance, that they have their approvals from the township. And again, this is if this is the direction you want to go, they can provide that information. Also, which I think is probably the most important part, they offer enforcement hotlines that are available 24/7, where if a resident has a complaint, they can call this hotline, talk to a live respondent, who will take their complaint, take the information and evidence they have. They will contact whoever the primary contact within the 30-minute or 60-minute radius, or whatever the township may decide, and inform them that there is an issue going on and that it needs to be addressed right now. And they will track that. Now, if compliance doesn't happen, then they can forward that on to the township for the township to take further action. But there are options out there for those 24/7 code enforcement issues. If we go to the next slide. So this is an example of the address identification. So one of the companies provided a review of listings in the township for the month of August. They were able to find 26 listings representing 20 unique rental properties. So these were active rentals within the past 30 days. So that's one way for us to identify who's out there, where are they, and identify that they're in compliance or not. They provide additional information talking about what the median nightly rental rate was. So that was $281. Now that does include some of the city of Fenton, because they're trying to get the area rental rate, not just what's in the township. Out of those rental unit types, they identified that 94% were single or for the entire house, while 6% were just for part of the house. The majority of the listings were single-family homes. There were about 13% for multifamily homes, and then about 1% of unknown home types. Just some of the websites that they looked at, right, were Airbnb, Booking.com, Expedia, TripAdvisor, and then that other includes the other 65 sites that they look at. So they monitor these sites daily, sometimes multiple times a day if there's issues out there, and they're checking the listings for compliance with township ordinances, right, because people know when we're in the office and when we're not. And if in the weekend they want to put a listing out there saying that they can rent out to 15 people when we've told them they can rent out to 6, they'll catch that, take pictures of that, take pictures of the avatars for who's renting them, because Airbnb requires that the host have a picture of themselves as part of their bookings. So they are in that compliance monitoring system, so that they make sure that they're following what the rules are. And if we go to the next slide, there's other enforcement ways, right? So we have the 24/7 hotline, right? And the hotline doesn't necessarily mean it's just only on a phone, right? It could be on a website or email. You can text complaints, and they will forward those on. They will attempt to get resolution at that point when the violation is going on, and they will track those complaints. They will provide any resolution notes so that we can follow up, or when we do a review, we are able to say, well, X, Y, and Z was happening, you weren't in compliance, and for this reason we're going to approve it, or for this reason we're not going to approve it. There's other services available for noise monitoring, and these companies market themselves as ways for hosts to monitor their own rental units to make sure they're in compliance with local municipalities' regulations. They have decibel monitors inside the houses, and they can, tell if someone is violating the noise ordinance and notify both the applicant or the host and the rentees that they're in violation, and provide an opportunity for them to come into compliance. And they also can provide crowd monitoring, right? So Airbnb has regulations against holding parties, and that's part of what the service that these guys provide. So there are solutions out there for addressing some of these concerns. So if that is the direction that the board chooses to go, there's options out there that would work within our current system.
Thank you very much. All right. Are there any questions or comments regarding the survey from the board or the planning commissioners?
I have one for Mike, and I'm going back to it. It was the, I don't know what slide it was, but it's the, which of the following issues related to short-term rentals have you personally experienced in your neighborhood? And you got a bar graph up there, but on the bottom it's 0 through 600 with access title. Can you explain what that is?
Ooh.
I'm assuming it's a number of respondents instead of a percentage.
Correct, it is.
Okay, and also, how many people, I saw the people that live on the lake were separate from the people that do not live on the lake. What percentage of the population of Benton Township lives on the lake?
Julia, could you help me out here? Do you know what the breakdown is?
I gave those figures to Tom, but I can't remember what it was.
I don't know off the top of my head. I can find that out for you, though.
I just wanna know because I wanna know what percentage. I mean, you got more people that don't live on the lake that are okay with this versus people that responded that live on the lake that aren't. I just wanna know what the actual overall percent of the population is that's having these concerns.
Sure.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Any other questions for Mike regarding the survey, from either the board or the planning commissioners? All right, hearing none, we will now, I will now open up the meeting for public comment on short-term rentals only. To make sure that every resident has a chance to address the board, I'd first like to call on those that were not at the last meeting. Not everyone here on this board was able to listen to you at the last meeting, so we will call on you, but I thought what we could do is to call on those that were not here at the last meeting to come up and address the board. So is there anybody, we'll start over here, is there anybody on this side, front row, that did not address the board that would like to address the board? Second row? Third row? Fourth row? Okay, go ahead and come on up. If you would please, just state your name for the record. And we are asking you tonight to limit your comments to about.
Yeah, my name is Bill Penn. I live on the lake. And I just have one quick question. 92% of the respondents said they didn't want this to happen as far as short-term rentals. So if that's the case, why are we even going any further? You know, the rest of this, everything else up there was what if.
Mike?
So I would say that the question wasn't asking, that question specifically was asking if you do rent or if you plan on renting. 92% said they do not plan on renting. We had a specific question later that asked, do you want to see it banned or do you want to allow it?
Right, but that was what if the township was going to allow it. But the initial response was 92% said no.
Well, it said no, that they do not and they don't plan to.
Well, that's my point, right? I mean, why go any further? 92% are saying they would not and they don't plan on it. So why are we even taking it any further?
Well, I think, you know, you can make an argument about, I don't plan on opening up a restaurant, but I'd like to see a restaurant in here.
These are people that live on the lake. And obviously there's people that lived on the lake and people that did not live on the lake. So it was 92%, it was the same number. So it's not just the lake residents, it's the people even outside. To be honest with you, I don't want to see it, and obviously 92% of the people that responded don't want to see it as well. I mean, so all the other stuff was what if the township said, you know, that was going to allow it. Well, there shouldn't be any what if because people don't want it.
But right now, the ordinance does not prohibit it. That's what we're talking about. You know, we haven't decided what direction we're going to do. Maybe when we're done with this, the option is we do nothing and see where it goes from here.
Well, I'm just saying, you got the people that responded, and 92% said they don't plan on it. They're not, and they don't plan on it. I think that speaks for the community right there.
Well, not to contradict what you're saying, but I think you're misunderstanding, and I think Mike tried to explain it. Those 92% just said, like myself, I'm a riparian, I've lived in the township for 40 years, I don't plan on renting my house out. But it doesn't mean that I'm for or against short-term rentals.
But
So
they-
just
but-
because I decide I don't wanna rent out my house does not mean that I'm against it.
But they also said they're planning on not doing it as well.
Right, I'm not planning
Well,
on renting out my house.
I
It doesn't
underst-
mean I'm against them.
I
Or for it.
understand that, but listen to the community. I mean, that's all I gotta say.
All right.
That's my piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else on the right-hand side that would like to address the board? Let's go to the left-hand side, my left-hand side. Is there anybody that did not have a chance to come on up? And all I'd ask is you please state your name.
Hello, my name is Chad Craddock, and I've lived on the lake for about almost 10 years now, different spots on the lake. I currently live at the end of Enid Boulevard now. I don't personally plan on Airbnb my house out or anything like that, but I have done a lot of Airbnbs on Florida and Holly, different places, and I have about 30 of them myself. And based off of everything I've watched and I've seen from personal experiences, what happens, and from my experiences for many years now, is there's a big difference if you go from a 1-day situation to a 5-day or a 4-day situation. The 1-dayers, you end up with a lot more of the party activities and this and that I have seen over the past multiple years, is when you end up with that short 1 day like it's a motel, which my personal opinion, it should not be a 1-day situation. Based off of everything I've seen, everything I've done, it needs to be a little bit longer, maybe a 3 or 4 day situation. That's just based off of my experience. Now, is it gonna be a little bit different if there was something allowed on a lake specifically? Maybe, I can't say for sure, but I can tell you based off of multiple years of experience dealing with that, it's a big difference between a 1-day stay and a 3 or 4 or a 5-day or a week stay. It's very different. It's very different. The people that you end up with and the situations you end up with that you're in. So,
Chad, thank you
Point
very
out.
much. Good comment. Appreciate it. Anybody else behind Chad that would like to address the board? Oh, okay, come on up. Just ask you to state your name.
He got the 92% for, but I got the email on Friday and it said that 80% of the lake residents are against short-term rentals. That's right there on the email that I received on Friday.
So that was a separate survey, and I believe that was done by the Lake Fenton Association?
Yeah, so Lake Fenton.
Lake Fenton Property Owners Association.
Lake Fenton's on Lake Fenton, so that's 80%, that's no.
Can I get your name?
My name's David Swaniger.
Okay.
I've lived next door to a Airbnb for 4 summers and 3 winters. I was okay with it at first. It's progressively gotten worse. I'm not sure if that's because all these surveys just came out, but this summer was like the wild, wild west. It went from 3-day stay, like he said, to 2 different 3-day stays a week. And just speaking money-wise, quote unquote, he said that what he's charging, these people could stay at Ritz-Carlton. I'm guessing probably $1,000 a day and maybe $500 for the pontoons and jet skis. That's a lot of money. I wish I was making it. But obviously the parties, he said 3 days. This guy stayed 2 weeks, 10 cars every single day. For those 2 weeks, little screaming kids. Doesn't matter if it was a Tuesday or a Saturday. I don't, like I said, most of the time it's fine. But it was a little crazy this summer. I'm not expecting that to continue, but my experience has been so-so. I wouldn't recommend it to a family with kids. You have a lot of strangers, 2 sets every week. I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but my experience, at least this summer, has been not very good. Obviously, rules or ordinances or regulations are fine. I wish I could go back in time and not purchase the house in the first place. And I'm not the only one that feels that. My other neighbor feels that on the other side as well. And I'm fine with rules and regulations and stuff. I didn't even fill out the survey. But that was before the summer. Things have changed. And if we could go back, cool. But I guess the only two questions I have is if we don't go forward, or if you do ban it, when would that take place? And two, what's to stop them from continuing to list it? For example, my coworker's brother-in-law rents his out, and he doesn't care about the fines. He's making so much money, he's paying all those fines with the money that he's making. That's up in Petoskey, which I'm sure they pay a lot to stay there, but I guess those are the two questions I have.
Well, to answer the questions, we can't really tell you right now when this board is gonna make a decision.
Okay.
That's what this process is. We've been working on this process, Mike, now for how long?
Beginning of the year.
Yeah, I was gonna say, since January. So it's, we're taking it very seriously. That's why it's been very methodical. I
Yeah.
really applaud the planning commission, the work that they put into it.
For sure.
And it's not even to the point where it's even coming up to the board. An ordinance isn't even being presented. So this is, again, this is just part of the process. So
Yeah.
I can't answer that question when it would be.
What about if it does go through and the warnings or the fines, like I said, they're making a lot of money, and they don't care about the warnings,
Again,
or
I
at least
can't
in some
answer that
cases.
right now. The process is gonna be, the planning commission is gonna make a recommendation to the board is gonna take a look at that. It may go back to the planning commission, but all of those things, I can guarantee you, are being considered.
Okay, thank you.
Before you leave, though, I want to make sure I understand you.
Yes.
You said you wish you could go back in time and not buy the house.
Yeah.
And that's simply because there's a short-term rental next door? Or is it an issue with being on the lake, or?
It does, okay, so if the Airbnb is there, I'd say, it's a small fraction of the time that they're having parties, like I said, the 10 cars, it's, maybe 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4 people. When the owner's there, he has like 30 to 40 people there, so it's a big party. And so like for the 2 weeks, it was maybe 10 cars, which minimum, that's 10 people, probably more than cars because there were a bunch of little kids. And then it went from 10 cars to a party so it was like 3 weeks where I had 10 cars next door, and then I had like 30 to 40 people next door, parking in the grass, RVs, the whole nine. It's 4th of July, I get it, but 3 weeks of partying nonstop next door, I don't think anybody here would want that, but that's what I experienced. And like I said, I think it was kind of the Wild West. There are no rules or regulations. I think things just went up on, like I said, more people, more days, and pontoon and jet ski usage. And when people spend that kind of money, they want to have a good time. And they had a good time. And a lot of times it was at mine and my neighbor's expense. And I don't wish it on anybody.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Hold
Thank
on.
you.
Oh, we got another question?
One question.
Sorry.
Yes, sir.
I'm very concerned about kids being exposed to people that they don't know. And I'll use an example. I have 2 6-year-old granddaughters. If there's kids next door, or if we're at a park, they gravitate that way.
Yes.
They familiarize themselves. You said you had some concerns.
I don't have kids. I'm the ideal next door neighbor to Airbnb.
Okay.
But if I did have kids, or if anyone else here had kids, I would not recommend having an Airbnb next door, because you don't know who's next door. Someone could buy it, but someone else could be staying there. And I'm just glad I don't have kids, because I don't have to worry about those things, because I know the people that do, they do worry about those things, whether it's a grandparent or a father and a mother.
Yeah. Okay, I misunderstood what you said then. I
Sure.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, David, I appreciate it. Anybody on this side again that, yes, sir?
My name is Bob Harris. I live at 13385 Lakeshore Drive, right next door to an Airbnb. And 2 houses away from me is another rental that has had no problems because they've rented for like 2 months long. And the biggest thing I see is we get short-term rentals over the weekend, and they are there for one reason, to throw a big party. And not only that, but the owner has a business that she is a party venue. She has had weddings there. There is no one we can complain to who works over the weekend. Our enforcement officer does not work Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And that's when most of the complaints are, and it's mostly from those people. And I think that's the same concern you heard. The short term. People who are there for 2 weeks long, it's a completely different situation. They're courteous and stuff. I also have another thing I'd like to read. This is my wife wrote, and it kind of addresses what someone said. I would like the township to address the survey. Why did you add together the residents who want STRs with no restrictions and wanted STRs with restrictions? The results were 8% no restrictions, with restrictions 37%, and 48% for a total ban. When you talk about it, you make those sound like they're close. Over the Labor Day weekend, I asked neighbors how they voted. Those who voted for STRs with restrictions were informed that they were included with the ones with no restrictions. The answer was why. They thought there were 3 options, but the township really made it only 2 options in that survey. Can the board or planning commission explain why those kind of were lumped together? And another concern is enforcement of restrictions the township might impose. This is a complaint-driven system, so does that make the neighbors the enforcer? There would need to be a 24/7 support. Our enforcement officer presently works 4 days a week. And I think that's kind of addressed with the thing there. How is it that STRs were not considered businesses from day one? It generates income, they are advertised, they rent boats. I would think they would use tax write-offs. Can you say why the standard protocol was not applied to these from the very beginning? Also, you never know who's renting the STRs. They are complete strangers, and most likely the owners of the STRs have never had face-to-face conversations. We were told that during the rental process, the potential renter is questioned, but the owner admitted that they are not always truthful. So even though Airbnb and the owners have restrictions, it's obvious that there are flaws. As this is a business in a residential neighbor area, the neighbors should have been informed. Isn't that what's usually done? This has been going on for an extremely long time while the STR's owners benefit at the neighbors' costs. That's been going on with us for over 2 years, and we have been complaining. I'm sure everyone here already knows our names because of that. And it's because of, mostly because of the way it is rented. And they advertise, bring parties, bring your boat, bring all this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Mike, did you want to address the combination of the two and why you presented it that way?
I think I tried to address it, but I think based on the information provided, that the allow with no regulation is a really a viable option. And if I'm wrong with that, I'm wrong and I apologize.
Okay.
But I would assume that those that said allow with no regulations would also be in favor of allow with regulations. And that's why they were combined together. So it wasn't that the thought was, oh, we're going to do something that take the majority that say with regulations and we'll just lump them in with no regulations. It was lump the no regulations with regulations.
I would point out also that that's just in his chart where they've been added together. We have the raw data.
Right.
So we can look at the raw data. I think that's the point.
I just want to add that I just think that saying with regulations and not having what the regulations are makes that just a...
But we have those numbers that you were talking about. We know, and to Mike acknowledges that the ones that say allow without restrictions is not a large number. Okay, but we know what those numbers are. So you're right, it does make, if you're saying it was a 50-50 between allow with regulation and ban, it does make the number look closer if you add that 8% or whatever it is. But we have that data. And I think we have enough sophistication at both board levels that we can understand what we were being told.
Also, just so the residents understand that when the survey was done, there was a lot of there was a lot of meetings that we talked about what we were gonna do, but again, you know, every SRS has its flaws. Simple random sample like this, like the survey that we did. So are there flaws within that? Absolutely. But again, as Treasurer Tucker said, we have the raw data, and we've got a good team of people that can tear apart that data. So I understand exactly what you're saying, and
Before anything's done, I think that you need to take what those regulations are and then see if the people are in favor of it, if you come up with that option.
again, this process has been a slow-moving process. We are in no hurry. But again, we do have people that are out there, like you, that have, you know, STRs right next door to them. So we do have an urgency to make a decision, but at the same time, we want to make sure that the process that we go through is very inclusive with the residents. And I think we're doing that.
My wife mentioned it, I'm really unsure why they're even allowed, because other businesses that are in residential neighborhoods, they had to come and get a permit, notify neighbors, but STRs don't. They just do.
They popped up very quickly over the last couple of years. Became a lot more popular.
If I can take a minute, the reason, if you go north of here, there's areas where they've been doing it a lot more intensely for a lot longer. And it's allowed for litigation to happen on the very issue that you're raising. Because I think it's a rational argument to say this is a business in a residential district. That's a rational argument. But some of these cases came out and said, no, the use is a residential use. They were going to address the issue.
But doesn't our regulation say residential use in a neighborhood, you do it for some money-making business?
Well, that's what that was the argument in court. Is this a residential use? And they said it is. And you can disagree with it. But that's the reason. Okay, that's why they're just not. You know, if somebody had opened up a bar or something like that, then yeah, that would have been shut down immediately. But there's everything about this topic is a fine line. and there's a fine line as to whether it's a business. I think that's a defensible argument. You can also, I think it's a defensible argument to say it's a residential use. So I see it. That's what makes it hard.
But when they do boat rentals, and when they do
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you.
So I will say we are addressing the boat rental issue.
Yeah.
That's being addressed.
All right. Is there anybody, I'm just going to move on. Is there anybody else on this side that would like to? We're going to just keep the public comment going. We'll have some time for that, I promise. Would you please just state your name for the record?
My name's Marcella Jones. I do not live on the lake, but I do live in like a nice little family-oriented subdivision right before you get to the end of the lake off of Golden Shores Drive. So we live in a lot of condos. My unit is 4 families actually attached. I have a 6-year-old son and 11-year-old daughter, and somebody that owns an Airbnb just came and looked at the house that my neighbor, who I absolutely love, put up for sale a couple days ago. I'm completely against this. It kind of frightens me to be having every weekend or every other weekend. We have a pond in the backyard. You can kayak fish. It's a nice little setup, but it's not meant for, I don't know. I'm a single parent with 2 kids. There's nothing but kids all around the neighborhood, riding their bikes, running around, just living their life being kids. I'm not for it. I'm also a case manager, so because my unit's attached and it's not like a separate house, I'm also kind of thinking of bed bugs and other things that were not in the survey. Who's going to pay for that if they come into my unit type of thing? Because it's basically a hotel next door. Sorry, my voice is shaky because I'm a little nervous.
Take
your
time.
Don't be nervous.
Oh, yeah. And then I guess other than that, I just have one question for everyone. If you were in my circumstance, would you want Airbnb next to your house? And if you would not mind it, please raise your hand. Thank you.
You did very well.
Is there anybody else on this side? Yes, sir.
My name is Andrew Brown. I live on Blue Water Drive. I have a question for Attorney Belzer. And I've just spent my 69th year on the lake, and I've watched it throughout the years just grow and be crazy and dangerous and so on. Mr. Belzer, have you ever had any dealings with something like this previously that you were involved in? And if so, how did it pan out?
I mean, I don't know this isn't meant to be a
This is,
question
this
and
is a
answer.
public comment.
Oh, okay,
It's
well,
not
that-
an opportunity to ask, an attorney,
Okay, well, I'm good.
a legal opinion.
Okay, let's just go back. I'm very much against this, been like all my life. I think the lake is getting very dangerous every year, and I think the township ought to take a good look at this and listen to the people that voted.
No, thank you
Thank
for
you.
your comments, I appreciate it, I really honestly do. Anybody else? So I'm just gonna open it up to anybody on this side that, whether you spoke, last time or not, if you'd like to address the board, come on up, sir, you wanna come on up?
Who's this?
Yeah, George Dyball. Good evening to the Planning Commission and Township Board members. First, let me begin by saying I'm very grateful to live in such a great community and township as Fenton Township. I've been here for the past 30 years. Over those 30 years, I've had a chance to work with some of you people up here on the boards, along with many of your predecessors, either directly or indirectly. You're here as duly elected, appointed representatives to hear the input of the residents on this issue. Tonight, I'm here because I think this issue that we're talking about has the potential to have long-term devastating impact on this wonderful community and the property owners who've purchased their property with a given set of expectations. I, for one, and probably most of the residents in Fenton Township, bought their property based upon its location and the zoning district that it was in. However, with that came rules, regulations, definitions, and expectations of what that zoning district was created for. So if you wanted rural or wide open spaces, then you bought property in agricultural or rural zoned areas. If you were going to set up a business or start a business, then you looked in commercial zone areas. If you wanted quiet and serene family environment, then you bought in residential zoned areas. You had two choices there. You could buy in either single family or multi-family districts within residential areas. But one thing's for sure, was with all these areas, there's unique characteristics that set them apart from one and the other, and they were defined. And I feel the vast majority of residents that live in single-family residential zone properties purchased their property and never expected or wanted to see different groups of people who are non-owners of the property, and even many cases, multiple families on a monthly, weekly, or even worst case, daily basis in the lots next to them. I think you've already heard other people saying that right now. Those types of characteristics do not meet the definition or expectation of a single-family residential zone classification. So whether you call them an Airbnb, a VRBA, an independent business, or a short-term rental type of property, these usages do not belong in single-family residential areas. However, I do believe they should be allowed in one or more of our other zoned areas. And in the highly unlikely situation that our township wants more of these types of properties, it should put them into our future planning model and that makes sense in areas that would not compromise the quiet and serene single-family residential areas. I thank you for allowing me to express my opinion, and hopefully you, the township representatives, will support the vast majority of residents who feel like I do on this issue and act accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else over here who'd like to address the board? Yes.
Speaker, I gave things very succinctly. I've lived on this lake since '48. And what I see happening, and it's been a long time, is you get people that are not long-time or not permanent residents. They're there for a week. They don't give a damn what happens, okay? They trash stuff, okay? They take the boats out on the lake. They're really not part of the community. And I think that's what causes communities to go downhill. I mean, you look at communities that go downhill, you get a lot of people in it that just plain don't care what happens. And when they plain don't care what happens, the communities start to go downhill. And I think that the value of the lake properties will go down as this happens. We get more and more of those people. And I feel that if we keep our, no Airbnbs, that our property will maintain its value. If not, it's going to go down. But that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else would like to address the board? Yes, sir, come on in. State your name if you would, please.
Mark Lemon, 2307 Fisk. It's a street that doesn't exist on Cases Island. I'm the guy who did the survey for Lake Fenton property owners. I thought I should address that because there's some confusion. We have a mailing list of physical Lake Fenton property owners, about 500 people. Sent out a survey, simple question. Should we ban short-term rentals, yes or no, or need more information? It was the only question. 80% said ban. That was about 150 residents, and you can say, well, our numbers were bigger. You're exactly right, your numbers were bigger. However, if you look at probability and statistics and look at all that, even with a 10, 15% margin of error, 80% is 80%. It's a simple question. That's what we got. That's why the Lake Fenton property owners picked the decision that they did and made the resolution that they made, which we've presented to you guys before. I'm sure you know what we want.
Is that resolution voted on? Ask a question? Is that resolution voted on?
Yes.
And approved?
Yes.
Of your 500 and some people that you sent out, how many responses?
150 or so. I don't have that exact number in front of me.
80% of 150?
Yep.
So you had about 100 that said ban, and there's 500 people on the way?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll freely admit it wasn't as statistically significant as yours, but even given that, you plug in the numbers in a margin of error, and even if you say 10% of margin of error, 15% of margin of error, which actually it shows only 8-point-some% margin of error, is still a vast majority. But it's a simpler question. So that's where that's at.
Was that survey was just on Lake Fenton, correct?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Because there's like
Hi, Phil. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Anybody else that would like to address the board at all? Anybody here? Yes, sir. State your name for the record.
Jim Rutt, 12558 Casawago. I'm the president of the Lake Fenton Property Owner Association, and as you just heard from Mark, our survey was pretty obvious, the answers, and this whole system seems to be dragging this out, is the way I see it, in my opinion. I know I came to a meeting before I went to Florida last year in November, so I know this has been going on at least this long. And the thing that kind of bothered me was the data, as you've already expressed, and because it included with regulations, some of the regulations were not in single-family residential. So I think that number is just so skewed, it's kind of frustrating that we are even here still. And I know we just feel like this is the wrong direction. It's been going on too long. Nobody really, I think if you really corrected the data, it would be so obvious that it's not wanted, that we should be doing something now. I mean, how much longer can this go on? I'm guessing that the number of STRs has doubled since we started this. Would anybody be able to deny that?
We don't know. We never really had a company that could go out there and look at them a year ago, so to be honest with you, Jim, I couldn't comment on that. Mike, I don't think we checked a year ago.
I mean, so, we've done our research to the best of our capabilities, right? You search the known websites and see what you can find, but again, right, listings aren't every day. If you don't look at the right time, or the right range, you may not find one or two, or 10, or however many there are. I think at least my original estimate was 13. Based on having a company actually do research, it was 20 in August, but that's just August, right? I mean, there's other months out the year. So, I guess we don't know, and that is, something that we'd have to figure out anyway, right? Because if the answer is no, right, we need to find out who's operating, make sure they're not operating anymore. And if the answer is yes, we need to know who's operating so they can be in compliance.
Well, Jim, just to address, you say that this process is not going fast enough, and that we're not preventing these. I would stick up for both boards in the sense that the methodology behind what we're doing, I think, is the right thing. I mean, just the last 2 meetings alone, they were written up in the Tri-County Times, we sent out notices, and we have a handful of people show up. If there was, and I'm not going to say whether I agree, because I think everybody knows how I stand on this, but what I'm saying is that we are trying, it may take us a little longer because people don't participate as much as maybe we would like to see. But this is a very important decision. We know it's a very important decision. I think this board knows it's a very important decision. I know the Planning Commission knows it's a very important decision. So, I truly believe in the process in which we're going through. I know it may be slower than you think, but we do want to make sure that what we do is in the best interest of the township and its residents, so.
I understand and appreciate that. I'm just, like I say, I'm guessing the number has doubled in the last year. And so, not doing anything is kind of allowing that to happen. And I've asked before, why don't we consider a moratorium until we can make that decision? Because of what's going on. It's just going to get worse. And I know you probably all know this, but New York City just banned short-term rentals. I don't know why or what's going on, but I think there's a lot of people here in the township that do not want them, and that's obvious. I'd like to see that data refigured to include the correct information, because I think it's misleading to insinuate that it's almost a 50-50. And again, I wish you guys would consider a moratorium to, so this doesn't drag out too much longer. We get a whole bunch more potential litigation.
Well, you're talking to the 2 boards that can make that happen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for showing up. Anybody else in the audience? Yes, Julia.
I'm gonna try to make this quick. So,
This
there are a lot of
is the
things
township assessor, Julia Wilson.
there are a lot of things that everybody is talking about here. I'm hearing a lot of things about valuation and what's going on, and I've heard people talk about people can't sell their homes. After our last meeting, I did look at it. People can list their homes at whatever they want to list their homes at. Because it's not selling doesn't mean that the value is going down. It may mean because they're overpricing their homes on their listing prices. Because what we're seeing, what the assessed values are and what people are asking for, those sales are still coming over what our assessments are. So that is stabilizing the market and still going up. So people aren't really losing money, they're losing at what they want to anticipate that they could sell their home for, and not anticipating on what the market's doing. Another thing is that the market and valuation and assessment is based upon a 2-year sales study. It's very hard to forecast what that value is going to be until the market is out there and you see a turnaround with the sales of these short-term rentals turning around and selling, to know what kind of impact it has in the market. So I would like you to keep that in mind. Another thing is I strongly feel that they should be regulated if we are to allow them, for several reasons. The most important one is the principal residence exemption. And the state is in the state legislature right now and the Assessors Association are looking at putting through some new legislation. Because depending on the verbiage and the short-term rentals, we have people that are claiming this as their primary residence and getting a almost 35% reduction in their taxes. Because at one point in time, they may return to this home. You're gonna see a lot, and that's if they rent the whole home out. If they're only renting a portion of it, it's prorated. That's already there because it's not part of their primary residence. But there is, in my opinion, some circumventing of some laws going on with short-term rentals. And I don't believe if someone has a short-term rental, they should be getting the same exemption in tax break as what primary residents that live there year-round do. And I know that's not up to you, but just know that we are looking into that legislation and rewording some things under the qualifications of principal residence exemptions. Because they shouldn't have their cake and eat it too. Because they're getting both ends of the stick right now. There should be regulations. I believe that because we don't know what the impact is gonna be, if we agree to this or if we don't agree to it, right now we're speculating and there are a little bit going on. I just went up and did a quick blush. And to answer your question, we have 21 lakes in Fenton Township, not 6 or 8, we have 21. A lot of people don't recognize a lot of those lakes, but they are lakes. The largest one is Lake Fenton, but also keep in mind that there is more than one lake than Lake Fenton in the township. And now I forgot where I was going with that.
That's all right.
Oh, we don't know what the impact this is gonna be with the residents in a residential area when we're talking about the zoning districts. I believe that, as with a special use permit, if we do short-term rentals, they should have to have some type of business license. There should be a list. They need to be vetted through, or at least approved through our office in some way with a special use permit. Now, I know when you grant special use permits, each of them are granted on an individual basis. And when a special use permit is approved, because we don't know what the end result is going to be, that special use permit should be reviewed every 12 months to 24 months to see if that particular address is an issue. If it is, fix it. You don't renew their special use permit because of what they've brought in and what the problems are causing to our long-term residents. And those are my ideas.
Thank you, Julie. Anybody?
One thing to follow up with Julia. I have an acquaintance that is an appraiser, and he says if he finds out that there's an Airbnb next to the house that he's appraising, he does put it down at least a minimum, 1%. That's not a big percentage, but he does lower the value of the home by 1%. I don't know if that's the case.
Probably shouldn't be doing that unless he has market analysis to do that. Maybe he does in the area.
That's hearsay. I don't think that we should go with that because we do not know that to be fact. I have not had a single.
Yeah, that's just one person's opinion, I understand, but it's public comment,
If you
so.
do another one of these meetings, I could bring him in and he may say the same thing, but it's hearsay.
All right, we're gonna move on. Is there anybody else? Yes, come on up. Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. Go ahead. No, go ahead, sir.
Eric Sloan, 2322 Grove Park Road. I'm probably going to be in the minority here. And I come from the perspective of, I grew up on a farm in Clio, Michigan before I moved up to Charlevoix. I was taken up there, lived 2 blocks from Lake Charlevoix and raced boats on Lake Michigan. I've lived on this lake for 23 years. Okay? Last meeting, we had some guys that said you don't have any rights. Well, 10th Amendment gives you rights to do regulations. So let's clear that up right now. 14th Amendment, Equal Rights Protection Clause. Okay? I take offense to surveys of lake versus non-lake. Okay? This is a township. We're all together. There's no division. We should not be dividing lake versus non-lake. Okay? Because frankly, I find a lot of lake people be snobs. I'm a lake person, and I take offense to us being more special than others in the township. Now, this young man talked about short-term rentals being longer, 5 days. more appropriate than 1 and 2. Our daughter owns one on Lake Fenton. She learned her lesson within a month. She went from 3 days to 5 or 7 or a whole week. Solved all the problems. And all these Airbnb, whatever it is, they have ratings. She ratted out some people. That's how it works. Okay? The last meeting, Mr. Tucker, I think, started with ordinances. We have noise ordinance, I'm quite certain. We have parking on streets. Okay? Enforce the law. There's ordinances on books, enforce them. If we don't have enough contract with Genesee County for deputy sheriffs for 7 days a week and 24 hours a day, then spend the money that way. I paid the taxes today. We bought chairs. Pay law enforcement, enforce the laws on the books we have now. Parking on the streets. What about when there's graduation parties at Grove Park? I got cars all over the place and in the road. Ticket and tow. Enforce the law that's on the books. Okay? Yeah. Regulations, absolutely, for this area. Minimal. You want a little license, you want a little fee, fine. I'm really scared by having some outside service to call to do regulations and follow up on people. Our law enforcement should do that and no other party. I'm a Thomas Paine patriot. We all know Thomas Paine, right? We also know Ronald Reagan said about the worst 9 words of the English language. Okay? Let's be Americans. Let's be nice to each other and not get into groups and so forth. That's what I got to say.
Oh, thank you very
And I
much.
apologize. I have to leave to meet my wife at Apple Fest in the pizza booth because we're the chair couple this year.
Don't forget the farmer's market.
Pardon me?
Don't forget the farmer's market.
Yeah, okay.
All right. You got time.
Be Americans. Love each other.
Anybody else that would like to address the board? Yes, ma'am.
Bring my dog with me next time. Vicki Hall. I was here last month when we didn't have a meeting, but you talk about, somebody said last month that this has been going on for almost 3 years. It was the first I heard about it, that you guys were looking at an ordinance. But that's what was said at last month's meeting, that it's been going on well over 2, going on 3 years, that you've been trying to put an ordinance together. Then at the meeting last month, or non-meeting last month, they were talking about doing their due diligence, I guess over the last 2 years or 2.5 years, and the 2 places that they came up with that they had compared to was just absolutely ludicrous. One was Florida for Airbnbs. The other one was Elk Rapids, Torch Lake. This isn't Torch Lake. This isn't Florida. I'm not totally against Airbnbs because I've stayed in one before on the bluffs out looking over Lake Michigan. It's totally different when you're in a subdivision and like my neighbor, you know, we have 4 units in one building. We had 17 cars on the street one day. None of us even knew there was an Airbnb down our road. Had no clue. I thought it was a graduation open house going on. Then Joan Garfield calls me and she's like, hey, so where are all these kayakers coming from on the pond? And I'm like, huh? Didn't have a clue. She found out that there was an Airbnb. We looked into it. Julia's right when she, you know, she's great anyway, what she does, but you guys need to concentrate on revenue. Property values, it's not that property values are gonna go down. Like the gentleman said, he wouldn't have bought the home, I think is what he said. He wouldn't have bought the house had he known there was an Airbnb. You know, you don't, anticipation, you don't know. But like in Julia's defense, you guys are looking for revenue for the township, and she has no way of knowing when an Airbnb comes in because they are not regulated. There is no licensing through the state. And the only way she can do it is from advertising. Well, they don't all advertise. Just saying. Think about it really, really seriously if you guys do go with it. But like, I wanted Vince to know, I mean, they did say last month that it's been going on well over 2 years, trying to put an ordinance together.
I wasn't at the meeting last month.
I know you weren't. That's why I said in your defense, I wanted to let you know
Yeah,
that that
gonna
was
say,
what was.
all I know is my conversation started with Mike about a year ago, it was in January, not, yeah, in January.
I
So
mean,
I don't know anything
I-
about what was said at the last meeting, but it's not true.
I
It's been about
enlightened
January.
Julia I was having a garage sale, and that's how we found out about the one on our street. And then, come to find out, the woman had taken this duplex and turned it into a triplex now. So there's a separate entrance on the top level and a separate entrance on the lower level. So she doesn't know that that stuff takes place, you know, I mean, it's just, yeah.
There's so much going on.
I
And,
know.
You know, like you said,
Low density,
like
high
Florida,
density, if you're gonna go there, everybody think about it. I know you planners know about that stuff, but think about it, you know, high density subdivision, it's not a place for an Airbnb.
Well, I look at macro, the economic, you say, it's not like Florida, but I look at Florida. I have a home in Florida, and I can tell you right now, the houses are going crazy.
Yeah.
Prices are, you know why they're going crazy? Because REITs are coming in, people are buying Airbnbs, and they're paying over market value because they know the amount of money they're gonna
Right.
make. If you're on the intercoastal, and your house was worth $1 million, you're gonna get $1.5 million today without even batting an eye.
Exactly.
So these companies that are buying up these Airbnbs, they know the value of them. So there's a lot of things we have to think about. So, you know, you can talk about values going down. I can tell you in Florida, in a lot of places, Colorado, values are going through the roof.
So the neighbor that has the one for sale next door to her, it's not an Airbnb now, but an Airbnb lady went through it, the one who owns the two down the street. So we know it's a possibility, and yeah, they're willing to pay that kind of money. I mean, it's a crazy price she's got on it, but she may get it because of her putting an Airbnb in there. She's gonna, you know, make money. But Julia's gotta know that that's what's coming, so that it's not a sale that's used for, you know, valuation in the subdivision, so.
Well, anyone that's buying an Airbnb in this township right now is taking the risk that they could be no longer allowed. So if
Exactly.
they overpaid for a house for a couple $100,000, good luck. So we're, you know, like I said,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
I'm not gonna apologize for these boards because I think they've done a
So
great job.
keep on doing the due diligence, I guess, if y'all have been for
Well,
2 years or more.
We're
till
coming
you
to
get
an,
it right.
we're coming to an end, and we do appreciate everyone that's been here tonight and giving us their views. Is there anybody else that would like to address the board?
Dave's been.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've been trying to stay out here first. I know that Kim did the same thing. Yes, Dave.
Dave Cipher, 12160 Margaret Drive. We have an Airbnb in our home. Had it for about 3 years. In that 3 years, we've probably had about 300 night stays, maybe right around 300 night stays. To my knowledge, and talking to Mike and other people in the township, there's never been one complaint filed or called about our home. The Airbnb is about 30% of our house space, and that 30% is non-homestead, so we are paying additional property taxes on that portion of our home. We would like to have regulations put on the Airbnbs. We don't want to see them go out there. I mean, I think heard there's 13 or 15 in the township, and it sounds to me as if 2 or 3 of those have been the cause of this whole uproar about Airbnbs. So we want to see regulations put on them. I think there should be licenses. I open my home to the fire marshal and the building inspector to come inspect my house, you know, so I think there is a place for them. I think with regulations, we can have a happy marriage between residents and Airbnb folks. Half the people around my neighborhood didn't even know we had an Airbnb. We only allow 2 people in our space. There's no children, and there's no parties. Like I said, with 300 night stays and never been one complaint filed to the township or even to us. You can go on our site and look at our reviews. They're stellar. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes,
Jim.
I have a couple questions.
Sure, absolutely.
Do you occupy the home when the renter is there?
We live in the home.
Do you reside in the home when the renter is there?
Not all the time, no. We have a place up north, and there are times that somebody is staying at our unit whenever we're up at our cabin.
Do you grant lake access?
No, we don't live on the lake.
But you
There
have
is,
access to the
we have access directly across the street. It's a 20-foot access. We tell the people right in our write-ups and everything that there is no lake access. There is no usage of the lake. So yes, we are not on the lake. And we, you know, we have people that get up in the morning and go for walks or whatever, but, I mean, we have people that have been here from England for weddings. There's 2 or 3 people that live right on Margaret Drive that use our Airbnb whenever they have family come in from out of town and they don't have room for their people there, that they stay with us. So, you know, my opinion is there's a place for it, but you regulate them. It's just like, you know, I was thinking driving here. What do we do with Mueller's barn out there, you know, with music and stuff? He came in front of us last week because complaints were filed. We have the ability to pull his license if he doesn't, the noise ordinance isn't met. You know, the barn, where they have the barn fest, you know, he come in because there was some concerns about noise there. Again, you know, if you put regulations on them, and 3 strikes, you're out. You know, you get complaints filed against you, and you're not abiding by the ordinances and things, then you could lose your license, and there's nobody to blame but yourself. And that's the way I think it would be a good blend of allowing people to do them. You don't follow the rules and regulations, you lose your license, you lose your Airbnb.
Thanks, Dave. So, I appreciate it. Is there anybody else that's in attendance here that would like to address the board on short-term rentals?
I will. I've been here a few times. Can I come up?
Yes, absolutely.
I listened to the,
Can you give us your name for the record?
Charmaine Thorley, 12310 Windsor Beach. And I've,
Yeah.
12310 Windsor Beach, Charmaine Thorley. I live on a section of Windsor Beach that has about 8 or 10 houses all closed in together. We have a set of children, we have a grandparent, we're older senior citizens, we don't enjoy people playing loud music past, well, any time of the day, you know, we have to put up with it. But, you know, this is, if it's really bothering us, we have neighbors that are long-term neighbors, we can ask them, would you please turn it down a little bit? I've done that maybe once or twice, and they realize that, you know, it's maybe a little loud. You're talking apples and oranges. You're across the way, you're renting to couples that you say they don't, you know, they don't party. Well, what is it, do you think that on the lake, the people aren't coming to party, to get on the lake? We've talked this issue before, and I think you really need to give some thought to that. Do you want a residential area where children are getting up at 7:30? Well, my neighbor tells me one of their child's going to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go to an activity. And yet you might have next door some Airbnbs, and might be perfectly nice people, but they're going to want to sit out and talk and do their thing until 1, 2 in the morning. Somebody's got to get up and go to work. We are a working neighborhood or a retiree neighborhood. I'm not sure that you can fit an Airbnb in there and keep everybody safe. The other thing I brought up with how many people, you're saying maybe a week's worth of people coming in all summer long into the spring and fall. You don't know. You know maybe that they can afford the Airbnb, because I'm sure the Airbnb owners are going to check their credentials that way. But you don't know the people that they're bringing in. You don't know. When you have, you know, what type of people they are, can be very lovely people. I'm sure most people are. But that doesn't guarantee you a safety measure in your neighborhood, such as a real neighborhood affords. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Charmaine. Is there anybody else in attendance that would like to address the board? All right, hearing none, I'm gonna move to Zoom. It looks like we only have one person on Zoom, and it just says iPhone. If you would like to address the board on short-term rentals, if you would, just turn on your mic. I see that you're still muted. I'll take that as if you do not want to address the board. Okay, I will now close public comment. I'd like to have both the township board and planning commissioners discuss the options regarding regulating short-term rentals, so I'm gonna open it up for the two boards to speak.
This summer, I was fortunate enough to go over to Spring Lake, Michigan for a wedding. Spring Lake is part of Grand Haven and not too far from Saugatuck. I brought back a newspaper that I shared with the other planners of a whole block of homes were converted to short-term rentals. And I asked my ex-fraternity brother, what is this all about? And he said, the vast majority of homes in Spring Lake, Grand Haven, and Saugatuck are Airbnbs. They're rentals of some sort or another. I don't have anything wrong. That's a big area. Petoskey, full of Airbnbs. Traverse City, but those are resort areas. I don't see this, well, it bothers me if the thought is we're going to become a resort area. And as a planning commissioner, all of my planning friends have heard me make this statement. We've got to make sure we maintain the integrity of our township. It doesn't mean there may not be some Airbnbs that will be allowed. But I don't want us to become, I surely don't want us to become Spring Lake or Grand Haven or Saugatuck or Petoskey or Traverse City. I think those are great towns. I'm glad that people from Chicago can get to them in a hurry. Keep them away from our part of the world. But I don't want the basic feel for what we have. I've been here since 1978. I moved here because, well, for a lot of good reasons and a couple of not so good reasons. But I don't want to see this place become a resort, a center of people coming from all over to spend time with us. I know as a businessman, I'm sure there's people that will say, whoa, we want that business to come in. I'm not sure it's good for us. Excuse me. All right, that's my piece, Vince.
All right, thank you very much. Is there anybody else that's on the planning commission?
So I would like to add that my family has rented homes, VRBO and otherwise. We have rented in resort popular areas, you know, Napa and things like that. But we've also rented in areas that were much like the community we live in. And one of the reasons why we did that is we had a family wedding. We didn't have a family member who could house everyone, and it was fabulous to be able to rent a home where myself, my husband, my parents, my sister and brother-in-law, we all went in together and rented a home. We didn't throw any parties. It was on a lake. You know, there were no big bonfires. I mean, we had a wedding to go to. We behaved like normal people. And I understand that people do go places to party, but I think it's a small percentage. And I guess what I'm saying is I'm not totally against them, but I do think we need to enforce our ordinances, and I do think there need to be some guardrails around it. You know, I agree, maybe a special use permit or some sort of licensing. But, you know, and like Dave is saying, you know, he has neighbors who, they have company that come into town. Why can't they reside in his home and not be disruptive to the neighborhood? I think it can coexist. But we need to put some guardrails on it.
In some of our discussions, you know, we've talked about, you know, limiting the number of people at a facility, you know, based off of bedrooms. 2 people to a bedroom, it's a 1-bedroom house, 2 people, that's what we allow in ours. Or, you know, a 2-bedroom home, 4 people, not 20 cars.
Right.
And I guess we've listened to a lot of the public comments, and I just keep coming back to, we've got ordinances, just about every complaint, we have an ordinance, but we don't have anybody there to enforce it. Somebody's trespassing, what do? You know, you ask them to leave, if they don't leave, then you go call the police. At 10 o'clock at night, the music's loud, you go over there and ask them to turn it down. If you don't, what do? I mean, just like, I've got a neighbor down the road that's there every single day, he lives there, and I've had to go down there and ask him to turn the radio down. Had to ask neighbors across the street to please don't park on my yard. But, you know, just to say, just eliminate it, because you want to eliminate it, you don't regulate it.
Thanks, Dave. Anybody else? Yes, Phil?
Yeah, so I live on Lake Benton, and the house next to me wasn't a short term, it was someone, when I first moved there, was rented out the whole year. And we had some issues there but we dealt with them, you know, it wasn't that bad. So it was a small cottage, so there weren't that many people in there. But I think since we've been starting all these discussions, we've discussed many options, and I think the biggest thing we're coming up with is if they need to be regulated. And I think the biggest thing is if you do license them, regulate them, get them inspected, and then there's a process in place to actually do something about it. I mean, one of the things we talked about, 3 violations. There's a series, each violation has its own circumstances. But after the 3rd one, you revoke their special use permit, and they lose their special use permit, and they're done. And, I mean, my wife and I, we use Airbnbs a lot when we travel, because we find them to be, it's just nice. It beats hotel sometimes, and so, but, I think the biggest thing is, and I know a lot of concerns here were about the noise and stuff like that, but I think one of the things this committee's been talking about is setting in place regulations to prevent that from happening. And I guess that's my point of view.
Thanks, Bill. Any other board? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think the majority of the problems that are coming up is because we don't have any regulations currently. And that is the cause for it, and there's no accountability. So to sum up, you know, what everybody's been saying as far as, you know, it all comes down to holding people accountable, property owners that own these houses accountable. You know, you could have all these same issues from somebody who owns the house currently or is renting it for a year. What are you gonna do about them? You can't. But what we can do is start holding people accountable for their actions.
Thanks, Kim. Good point. Any other comments from any other board members? Katie?
Yeah, well, I guess I'd just say the special use, we talked about, we have problems with enforcing our different ordinances. So I think if we have a special use permit, it's then going to be taken away, you know, we have a place to record complaints, and people know they're gonna lose it. It's a little different than, you know, people just having to call the police every time there's noise, and it would, I think, be, you know, potentially kind of empowering. You know, we've talked about wedding venues, and noise complaints, and, you know, people are reluctant to call the police. I think they'd probably be less reluctant to just make a complaint that they know is going to be seen when the special use permit's reviewed in a year. And, you know, if enough of those stack up, then maybe it's 3, I don't know, maybe it's less, a little more. Maybe we do have a restriction on how many people can rent. Maybe you have a minimum or maximum number of days. But it does seem a little bit like a taking to me, although not in like the legal sense, to just say that people can't rent an Airbnb. You know, I'm living at home with my parents. I pay them a little money every once in a while. It seems strange to me that, you know, if I left, they couldn't rent out that room, knowing that they're living in the house and they're gonna make sure that, people aren't bothering them, they're not very tolerant of noise. My dad would, throw a fit if someone were loud, but it seems strange to me, the idea that they wouldn't be able to rent out the room in any way, even if it wasn't bothering anyone. So I would like to see some sort of special use permit, with a bunch of restrictions, based on the complaints we've heard. So that's my inclination.
Okay, thanks, Pete. Mr. Gopal, do you have any comments?
No, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm gonna echo what Kate said. Everybody knows I am for property rights, and as long as they follow the law, I will not tell people what they can and cannot do on their own property. I've been that way forever, I'll continue to be that way. It is a taking. I do side with that. We do have ordinances for that. However, this is the planning commission's recommendation. I respect this board immensely, and I will probably follow the line with what the planning commission recommends.
You might get a good response.
It is what it is. Again, I will never, ever take somebody's right away to do with their own property what is legal and allowed, because somebody else may not like it.
I agree with that wholeheartedly, but I agree that when they're residents, I do have big concerns with, like Andy's saying, when companies come in and buy these homes and they're not, they're not homestead exempted, and those are some of the guardrails we need to
We can
put
put the
around
guardrails in place.
this, is I don't want someone to come in and be able to buy a home that's just 100% short-term rental. I don't think that fits our community.
I also don't think a permanent ban is going to be effective, because, I mean, this has been going on a long time under people's noses, and we never paid attention, we didn't know about it, and I am no way convinced that if we do a complete ban on this, these Airbnbs will stop.
It'd be tough to enforce.
And
Right.
you're right, it would be tough if we didn't have anything in place with ordinances. And I think it'd be tougher than if we actually did have an ordinance in place to control that.
Rob?
I agree with Mark and Cade. We should have some regulations and special use permits, so we can monitor and control them.
Any comment at all?
Yeah, I'm mostly here to listen, because I honestly, I don't have an opinion. I've been accused of having an agenda and an opinion, but I don't. I mean, I don't. I can see the validity, the arguments on both sides of this coin. And I'll say this, I pushed for this joint meeting, because if we go down the path that it looks like the board prefers, it's gonna take a fair amount of work. And we've already done a lot of it. We've got a lot of examples of things that you can do, and I'm seeing and learning new things, Jim told me when he was up here, said New York City, I hadn't heard about that. So I did a little quick Google, and I'm looking, in New York City, one of their restrictions is you can't rent the entire place. And you gotta have somebody there. Now, I'm not saying that's where we're gonna go,
Right.
but my point is that, as we've been doing this, we've come up with a whole bunch of different concepts. And I don't think that there's any issue at all with coming up with mechanisms that are designed to deal with this. Now, are we gonna get it right the first time? Maybe we'll get lucky, but we don't have that burden. We can attempt to do it. But I really wanted to hear where the board was at, because I can also see the argument that this is a commercial activity in a residential district. I think that's rational. And I think the people that have been here telling us that, I understand that. Would I want one next door to me? Probably not. So I truly don't have an opinion about it, a strong opinion. I certainly have my opinions, but I really wanted to listen. And we've been doing that. And the board is coming in a little later, because honestly, we've only started in January. I don't know where the 2 or 3 years things come from, but we've been working hard to find out what everybody thinks. And I think we got a pretty good handle on it, because tonight was a good example of kind of what things were. You hear I think, compelling arguments on both sides of the equation. So I'm thankful for the board to be here, that's important. But the ability, for you to tell me what you're thinking, so that we're not spinning our wheels in the wrong directions. That's why I wanted to have this meeting. And I had some other possible ways to deal with it, but I think, from what you have said tonight, even without Bob commenting yet, I think I have an idea, what direction the board wants to go. And I don't want to take anything away from you, Bob. I honestly, people asked me, and I honestly said, I have no idea what this board's position would be other than Gopal. I could have told you exactly where Gopal was at, and he's said it 100 times, so it's not like I'm prophetic. And he's consistent, so I know that. So I thank you all for that. I thank you all for taking I'm sure you had better things to do this evening. We all did. This is important. It's important that we do it right. So I think we are.
I did close public comment, but I'll give you a minute if you'd like.
I was just curious, has the fire marshal been included in any of these talks?
He's sitting here, and absolutely he has. Our fire chief is sitting right back there. And that's a good question, but yes, he has been involved in the process. So.
I would think that would be one regulation.
Oh, absolutely, that he would be sent out to inspect every property.
If we go down that road.
If they go down that road.
With saying we're gonna allow these with conditions, certainly having the fire chief look at the place and tell us it's safe. He's probably gonna, if we go down that road, will be the one that tells us how many bedrooms there are, so we can come up with some of the math that we've talked about. So yeah, he's been a key player in this, and if we go with an ordinance of that nature, he's going to be a key player in that.
And like John said, going through this process, we're not saying which way we're going through, but if it is an allowed use, permitted use within this township, I can assure you that the regulations, everything that you could think of has probably been talked about and will be put into place. They are gonna have to have a license. And again, I'm not saying we're going down that road. I'm just saying all those checks and balances will be there. There is going to be fees. So somebody's gonna have to be serious about whether it's going to make profit for them, which I'm sure it still will, but there will be checks and balances. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, I just add two more things. I think we would want to make sure that we were taking in, enough revenue, whether it's through some fee, that we're not funding, people having to go out and inspect the houses, that burden isn't resting on, residents who aren't renting out Airbnbs. And then I do think whatever we need to do, and I mean, everyone's expressed this, but it needs to be, whether there's gonna be regulations in place or a ban, it really should happen, as quick as we can, and definitely before like the next, rental season starts. And not that people aren't renting all the time, but.
Completely agree.
Well, hypothetically, if we were gonna go down the path of allowing it with regulation.
Right.
And again, it's hypothetical, we're not making any decisions, anything. If we're gonna do that though, what I would strongly suggest that we do is have a police power ordinance that requires a special use permit in Fenton Township to do these. Why would I want that? Okay. What that does is bring all of the existing Airbnb folks into the ambit of whatever regulatory scheme we would set up. Okay. It isn't a free pass, I got here before the ordinance. Okay. The ordinance itself, and we'll involve Jack in this discussion, whether it's a zoning ordinance or a police power ordinance, if that's the route we go, that's one of the questions we're gonna have. But the point that I'm trying to make to everybody, because I know there's been concern expressed about the time and how many new ones there are, all of them will be forced into compliance if that's the path that the township board chooses to walk down. Including Dave.
I'll be the first in line.
I believe it.
Is there any other comment from the boards? Yes, Bob.
Here I go, John. Okay.
Yeah,
If you kept track tonight, we had 15 people address the board. One was a maybe, one was a yes. So if I kept track right, there was 12 of them that said no. If we represent the people, and I think that's what all of us have went out of our way on our time on the board, then that sends a message. Now, is that gonna start trouble? Yeah, we'll probably have lots of visits with lots of attorneys. Just to let you know, I've already been threatened by one person if I take away their verbo or whatever you wanna call it, and I'm taking care of that, but, no,
You gotta be careful when you say these things,
no, let's just say I'm working on it.
That's better. I can live with
Okay,
that.
okay. Help me with the legal
I'm
language.
trying, I'm here
John.
for you, Bob.
You know, I realize that based on the number of people that do it, want to do it, and there's a number of those, a minimum number, that don't follow even the current regulations. You know, we've got some ordinances. The best one that pops in mind right now is disorderly person ordinance. And it's not a blame of the sheriff or anyone, but if we put regulations on, then we've got to get enforcement ready and use it. You know, there's been comments by a couple of people to the young men and women that do out on the water. One guy said, hey, here's my home address. Would you not interfere with me out here and just put the tickets or violations in my mailbox? So I'm not naive enough to know we can just chop it off. But we've really got to come up with regulations that mean something, and we've got to enforce them. I don't like to see people getting tickets and issues like that. I know it keeps Mr. Belzer busy at times, but you know, if we have regulations and don't use them, then forget the regulations. Thank you.
Anybody else? What I would like to do is to say, yes.
Can I make one quick comment? I looked at some of the census information today for Fenton Township, and I think there's about 17,000 residents and about 6,000 households, and we have one police officer assigned to Fenton Township. So we can make all these regulations, but what is the capacity to even regulate it? Look at Mr. Harris, who's had problems for several years, has got no assistance from Fenton Township for the Airbnb right next to him. So how can we even imagine that there will be any kind of control or regulation of further Airbnbs? What's the capacity? There isn't one.
Well, we don't have just, and I'm not contradicting you, I'm just saying that we don't have just one officer in the township. We're contracted with, I think, 6, right? 5, but with a detective, plus the detective, total of 6.
One at a time.
No.
We talked to someone from the sheriff's office today, and that's what they told us. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, yes, Kim?
If I could just for a moment, the reason why nothing has been done is because currently there are no ordinances against it. That's why we keep coming back here today, and I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. The problems are happening because there aren't any regulations against it, and that's what we're trying to accomplish.
But there already are some ordinances in Fenton Township that would have been violated with Mr. Harris's situation that he got no assistance on.
I'm not familiar with the intricacies of that, of what transpired,
Well, you
so.
could talk to him about it.
Well, you know what, I'll be in the office tomorrow, I'd be glad. I have not heard, they haven't reached my desk, so if you would like, I would be glad to.
I think some letters were sent to you.
To me? Okay. Well, I apologize if I didn't get to them. We're gonna, okay. We're gonna kind of close down public, is it important? If it is, go ahead.
No, well, no, there's just so many questions I think are unanswered, and I think you need a question and answer from a session for us. I, for instance, don't know how many Airbnbs you're talking about. Can a neighborhood say, no, we don't want one? Can they have a right to say, we don't want that turned into a, we've got kids playing here, we don't know one, strangers wandering in and out. You know, people should have rights too. Neighborhoods were, residential neighborhoods were formed for that reason, not commercial ventures.
All right. Well, if there's no other comment from the board or anybody that is attending with us tonight, from the board, from both boards, I'd personally like to say thank you very much. It's people like you that come out that take the time, because you do have to remember we work for you, so we do listen to you. It's our job, and I do want to thank you for coming out tonight. And I'm sure the board has listened to, I think, probably 99% of the people that have been here tonight. And that's what this was for. So again, I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. And I'm sure the board took what you said seriously. So thank you very much.
So planning commission needs to make a wish.
I was going to do that. Planning Commissioner Chair, Mr. McGurk, could you adjourn?
I need a motion to adjourn our planning commission meeting. So moved. Support. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the Planning Commission meeting is adjourned at 8:17 p.m. What we're going to do now is we're going to take about a 5-minute recess. All of you that are here for the STRs, you can go. There's going to be no more conversation on that this evening. We've got a couple other things on the agenda we're going to take care of. So you're welcome to stay, but if you're here for the short-term rentals, you can certainly go. And again, thank you very much. We will take about a 4 or 5 minute break and reconvene.
Recording stopped.
You guys having to go to the fireplace?
I'm gonna need something.
No, I mean during our break.